smiling. Oh!
From decent knockout artists to one-punch killers, this is about that special kind of fear. The kind you feel when a fighter loads up and the entire arena goes quiet for half a second, because everyone knows what might happen next. Quick ground rule before we unleash the monsters. This is an all-time UFC-era punch power list, not an active roster-only list. Power does not expire, and we are not doing a science fair across divisions. Heavyweights bring raw force, lighter guys bring sniper timing, but if one clean shot can flip a fight instantly, they belong here. Simple filter. Who has shut the lights off? Punch inside the UFC cage. Cool, let's roll. But before we dive into the content, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but to us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, without much ado, let's begin.
Relaxed and smiling. Oh! Jesus!
Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is living proof that knockout power is not just about size. Sometimes it is timing plus a left hand that lands like a trap door. At his peak, Conor fought like he could see 2 seconds into the future. Wide southpaw stance, constant feints, little shoulder twitches that make you blink at the wrong moment. Then the straight left rips down the center line before you even fully register that you stepped into range. UFC 194 is the billboard. December 12, 2015, 13 seconds. One left hook. Jose Aldo, unbeaten in MMA for about a decade, drops cold. Fastest title fight finish in UFC history. That is not a war. That is a switch getting flipped. What fans love about that KO is that it was pure Conor. He read Aldo's first rush, slid back a half step, and fired into the exact space Aldo's head was moving toward. Prediction turned into power, and Conor's power was not a one-night trick. It traveled divisions. At UFC 205, he didn't just beat Eddie Alvarez, he dismantled him. Knockdowns stacked like receipts, and the ref had to step in before it got crueler. Conor never needed to drown guys in volume. The threat of one punch did half the work, and the punch did the rest. Even when he was not throwing, opponents were reacting to a ghost. That is why he belongs here. If Conor touches the right button, the whole fight shuts off.
Big right from Gaethje and down.
Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje fights like every punch is trying to rip a memory out of your skull. No points hunting, no polite exchanges. He is pressure, grit, and a wrecking ball. Early in his UFC run, Gaethje was chaos on legs. Incredible violence, but a little too wild. Then he grew sharper without getting softer. Same fire, better aim. That adjustment turned him into a power punch monster. That streak is legendary for a reason. James Vick is asleep in round 1. Edson Barboza folded in round 1. Donald Cerrone stopped in round 1. Then Tony Ferguson, one of the most stubborn lightweights ever, got battered into a 5th-round stoppage at UFC 249, while Gaethje fought through a bloodied, badly damaged nose and heavy facial punishment. That was not a decision run. That was a demolition run. Every fight ended the moment Gaethje found the chin. Fans also love the BMF chapter. At UFC 291, he iced Dustin Poirier with a head kick. Another example of how one clean strike from Gaethje changes everything. And even when he loses, the power is never missing from the story. Max Holloway had to land a last-second nuclear bomb at UFC 300 to put Gaethje away finally. That tells you how dangerous Justin stays until the final horn. The seal comes from Khabib Nurmagomedov. After fighting killers like McGregor and Poirier, Khabib still called Gaethje the hardest hitter he ever faced. He said those punches felt like a truck. That is survival data from an undefeated champion. Gaethje is not always a single bullet finisher. Sometimes one heavy shot starts an avalanche. Either way, once he lands clean, the fight changes shape. You feel it in the opponent's body language instantly.
That's it!
Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson's right hand has a name for a reason. The H-bomb is not a cute label. It is a warning. Hendo was never the biggest middleweight, but he carried an overhand that landed like heavyweight steel. One clean connection, and your lights go out. UFC 100 is the forever clip. July 11th, 2009. Henderson steps in, slings the overhand right, and Michael Bisping goes limp. The arena went from loud to stunned in a heartbeat. Fans replay it because it is violent simplicity. One punch, one fall. One of the most iconic knockouts in Octagon history. What makes Henderson a power monster is that everybody who feels it agrees. Bisping has said the most brutal punch he ever took in his UFC career came from Henderson, even though he fought a murderer's row of hitters like Anderson Silva, Vitor Belfort, and Georges St. Pierre. If the guy who got knocked out says you hit hardest, you take that crown. And the power did not fade into nostalgia. In 2016, at 46, Henderson still dropped Bisping twice in their rematch. Time slowed the legs, not the bomb. The hidden engine was Henderson's wrestling threat. He was an Olympic-level wrestler, so opponents had to respect the shot. That hesitation is exactly what lets the right hand land clean. A half second of freeze, then the H-bomb arrives. That is why Hendo fits this list perfectly. One clean shot was enough to delete your night.
Interesting. Oh! Just!
Anthony Rumble Johnson. Anthony Rumble Johnson was a jump scare with gloves. Fights could feel normal for a minute, and then 2 seconds later, somebody's soul was on the mat. He fought from welterweight up to light heavyweight and still carried nuclear power in every class. Most fighters lose pop when they move weight. Rumble did not. He dragged it with him like a curse. The UFC record book backs the terror. 11 KO or TKO wins inside the Octagon. Second most first-round knockouts in UFC history at 9. Translation: his power did not need time to heat up. It arrived at the bell every single fight. The cleanest proof is UFC 202. 13 seconds, one right uppercut. Glover Teixeira crumples, tooth flying. A 13-second knockout, one of the quickest losses of Teixeira's career and his first KO loss since 2002. Teixeira is durable, seasoned, and Rumble erased him before the fight even started. Hardcore fans remember the rest of the highlight reel too. Alexander Gustafsson, a striking technician, got smoked by Rumble's right hand and never recovered. Jimmy Manua got face-planted by one short punch after a feint. Ryan Bader shot in, got shrugged off, and then got nuked. The theme never changes. Rumble does not need a long setup. He needs half a second of your chin in the wrong place. Training partners and former champs have called him the hardest hitter they've ever felt. That kind of gym testimony is basically a stamp of doom.
Good because he's... Oh!
Alex Pereira. Alex Poatan Pereira is a left hook that found a body. Before the UFC, he was a 2-division Glory champion and the first fighter in Glory history to hold 2 weight class belts at the same time. His entire career was built on one idea. You step into his lane, you go down. Even Israel Adesanya learned that in kickboxing before their UFC rivalry ever ignited. In the UFC, Poatan knocked out Sean Strickland at UFC 276 to crash the title line. Then at UFC 281, he stopped Adesanya to win the middleweight belt. You can debate stoppage timing all you want, but nobody debates the damage. Adesanya was still trying to stay upright when the ref had to jump in because Pereira's left hook plus follow-up pressure was that vicious. Then Poatan moved to light heavyweight and turned 205 into a knockdown factory. Yuri Prochazka got stopped twice. Jamahal Hill got erased. Even when Magomed Ankalaev outpointed him at UFC 313, Pereira's power stayed the headline because of the threat it carries every second. And at UFC 320 on October 4, 2025, Poatan reclaimed the belt with a first-round stoppage right after the rematch bell rang. Pereira's low kicks sound like baseball bats. Those kicks freeze people in place. Freeze against Poatan and your chin lives on borrowed time. He presses like a glacier, slow, heavy, unavoidable. Once you touch the fence, the left hook lane is open, and that lane ends stories. Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt is heavyweight folklore. A K1 wrecking ball in UFC gloves. He won the 2001 K1 World Grand Prix, which means his punching power was royalty long before he entered the Octagon. That matters because Hunt's hands were not learned later. They were his first language. In the UFC, Hunt's punches were compact and cruel. No wind-up, no drama. Tight right hand, short left hook, opponent folds. That is why he became the king of walk-off knockouts. He would drop guys and start strolling away like the referee was paperwork. Roy Nelson got caught and face-planted. Stefan Struve, a giant who usually eats shots, got shut down by one clean Hunt punch. Frank Mir took a short right, hit the mat, and the fight was over. Even in wars, his power was the tide turner. Go back to the Bigfoot Silva fight, a draw that felt like a 5-round car crash. Every time Hunt landed clean, the crowd stood up because it felt like the next shot could end it. And fans also respect Hunt's chin. That toughness let him stay in the pocket where other heavyweights would shell up, and that gave him more chances to land bombs. If you want cross-sport proof, Hunt has it. Former heavyweight boxing champ Lucas Brown said the most brutal punch he ever took in his life came from Mark Hunt in sparring. When a pro boxer says a UFC heavyweight hit harder than any boxer he faced, that is world-class violence. Hunt's right hand was not just scary for MMA, it was terrifying for anyone with a chin. Derek Lewis. Derek the Black Beast is a chaos power. You can be winning every minute and still feel unsafe. Heavyweights fight him like they are tiptoeing through a minefield. Lewis holds the UFC all-time knockout record with 16 KO or TKO wins, and he extended that record in July 2025 by knocking out Talison Teixeira in 35 seconds in Nashville. Records do not happen by accident. Bodies do not lie. The scariest thing is that his power persists even after fatigue. The Volkov comeback is the poster. 2 rounds down and losing most of the fight, Lewis landed a knockout in the final seconds of round 3 at UFC 229. That is not a late danger. There is no safe second. You can dominate him for 14 minutes and still get erased in the 15th. Lewis does not need a perfect setup either. He can be pinned, tired, wrestling, leaning on the fence, and still detach your soul with a short right or a sneaky left hook. His knockouts come from awkward angles, so they are hard to read. And then he celebrates like he just finished a chore. That contrast makes the power feel even darker. One opening, one punch, curtain closed.
Not Ngannou's best punch, right? That's how power.
Francis Ngannou. At the top of the UFC-era punch power food chain is Francis Ngannou, former UFC heavyweight champion and still the benchmark for one-punch fear. In 2017, the UFC Performance Institute tested his power, and he set the Power Cube record at 129,161 franklins, the most brutal punch ever recorded on the Power Cube at the UFC Performance Institute. The number is absurd. The footage is even scarier. UFC 218 versus Alistair Overeem is pure nightmare fuel. Short uppercut, no windup, Overeem stiff, arena silent. Then Overeem, a K1 legend who fought everybody, said nobody hit him harder than Francis Ngannou. When a veteran like that says it, the case is closed. Francis Ngannou's UFC rise was a demolition montage. Curtis Blade is flattened twice. Cain Velasquez folded in seconds. Junior Dos Santos deleted. Jairzinho Rozenstruik dropped like a statue. Then the Stipe Miocic rematch ended with Francis dropping the champ and finishing him for the belt. Every knockout has the same feel. One clean touch and the opponent's legs forget the script. Yes, we already hear you typing. Junior Dos Santos had champion-level boxing and classic heavyweight nukes. Shane Carwin had concrete hands that detonated on contact. Either could live on this list. On another day, they slide in and nobody blinks. We promised 8 monsters, and these 8 give you a clean climb from dangerous to apocalyptic. Quick, respectful pass to the boss's favorites. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev are finish monsters, but their horror movie is grappling pressure, not pure one-punch shutdowns, so they sit outside this lane. John Jones is a finishing genius with elbows and ground and pound, but he is not known as a pure one-shot puncher either. Different monster, different cage.
Right from Gaethje. Cerrone takes an in.
Marvelous verdict. UFC history is full of dangerous strikers, but these 8 made power feel supernatural. Conor showed that precision can end fights without heavyweight size. Gaethje proved that damage can snowball from one clean shot. Hendo and Rumble were walking jump scares who only needed a split second. Poatan is a left hook-shaped nightmare, built to shut a fight off the moment you step wrong. Hunt and Lewis made heavyweights look like they got unplugged with casual, compact bombs. And Francis Ngannou sits at the top as the UFC-era benchmark for one-punch fear. But this is UFC. There is always another monster lurking in the replay vault. Who did we miss? Drop your pick and tell us the exact fight that sold you on their power.